Whatever Next Unplugged. Conversations about making transformation more human, more honest, and more likely to stick. And here's my next guest, Wendy Cohen, pioneer and global leader in strategy, execution, and business architecture. Hi, welcome to Whatever Next Unplugged, the podcast that lifts the lid on transformation. And today I have Wendy. She's famous. Everybody knows her for business architecture and business strategy. And I'm so pleased, Wendy, that you agreed to come on the show.
I am so excited to be here, Lisa, and cannot wait for the conversation. So thank you. It's my honor.
And Wendy, I have your book in front of me.
I have your book in front of me with all of my.
And today I'd love to expend sort of 20 minutes exploring your lived experience and how it gave you the foundation for not just your book, but your business and what you stand for.
Absolutely. Happy to share. And to be honest, it all comes from lived experience. Any theory is really emanating from that. So couple things. It really started for me when I was architecting enterprise transformation, top to bottom, working between the executives and all the teams to deliver. That's where I think I really lived all of these ideas, saw what worked, saw what didn't. The other part of it is working with organizations year over year to really help them get better at translating and executing strategy. And as I did that, I saw all the challenges along the way from strategy to execution. And I saw where those challenges are born. You know, when we see these execution challenges that show up like misaligned investments, duplication, they're all born by what we do or don't do up front and how we make decisions holistically. So that's really the genesis of my frameworks and all the things I do. It's that experience from strategy to execution and living enterprise-wide transformation.
And what sort of part of those frameworks and approaches really land with board teams and executive teams? You know, where is the heart of your framework and approach that really lands when you go in front of them or when you work with teams?
I love that question because over the years, I have gotten so sharp in just the right tip of the spear that is most impactful. And what I find boards and executives really appreciate is the capability mindset and the capability as the bridge between strategy and execution. And specifically that we know strategies, we can have a brilliant strategy, but capabilities help us say, if we're going to do that, what do we need to be good at? And when we can do that, it creates focus, it creates priority, it facilitates conversations around trade-offs, and that capability also allows us to organize the work, organize, the people, process, info, tech, and it gives us something to measure the value back to. Not just did we deliver the thing, but is it the value? So it's really that capability as the translator and as the keystone to link together strategy and execution.
When we look at that strategy to execution, and when we look at people, process, tech, and org, it's looking into the future, it's seeing what capabilities we need, and it's rewiring those layers. And that takes discipline and coordination. Um, what would you say were the key things that the board look for, the way you're giving them the confidence that people, process, technology is going to be rewired in a way that they're going to get results?
Yeah, I love that question. First of all, just having the people in the process in the conversation, not just the technology. I know that sounds really basic, but just talking about it and talking about a capability is holistically enabled by all of these things. I think it's also being able to, have conversations around the end to end, sort of the value stream, the delivery or the process, not just technologies, right? Otherwise, we kind of have these really siloed initiative technology conversations. It's talking holistically as a business. That gives confidence. And then also, like I said, we're going to measure value, right? We're going to make sure Did what we deliver actually tie back to objectives, outcomes, and real business value?
And that business value, I can see why boards and executive teams would look for that and looking at those capabilities and how those capabilities have to change. Do you see any appetite for conversations around the human aspects? Not so much the what people are doing today, what people are doing tomorrow, not the capabilities, but do you see an appetite to look underneath that?
I think this has multiple different parts. Appetite is is a really interesting question. Some organizations, hands down, yes, right? Like 100%, they're wired that way for the customer, for the employee, for the human. For many, it feels like it's an afterthought, honestly, when it should be our first thought. And when I said there are multiple aspects to this, honestly, it starts with strategy. Like, for example, AI is a great case in point. It doesn't need to be a default assumption that we're reducing people by leveraging AI, right? There are a million different ways to go about this and anchor that strategically. The other bit is around, things like change. Change management and org design are honestly, I find, some of the two least focused on afterthought sort of disciplines when they should be really upfront. So, is there appetite? I want to say there's growing appetite, but it's not coming in waves. And I think the organizations that do this well or will start to do this well will be the ones that succeed, honestly.
What do you think is behind the sort of human aspects being a also ran or a nice to have rather than a thought of from the very beginning? What's behind that, do you think?
We could talk all day about this. I would love to know what you think on this as well. I think some of it is industrial organization, structure, and legacy. And the structures that we're in, whether we realize it or not, and the inertia of the ways of working that were like sort of do stuff, deliver it. Oh, yeah, let's remember the humans at the end, right? So I think some of this is just inertia. Said a different way, though, where I think it's done well is when it's in the culture. Like one organization I'm thinking of, and they're well known and awarded for their customer experience. This organization, they literally at the beginning of every meeting, whether it's the CEO or whatever leaders in the room, they start by reciting the mission. And I won't say it out of confidentiality, but our mission is to serve the customer to blah, blah, blah. They say that in every single meeting. So, what I mean is that is embedded in culture. And that's reflected also in the fact that they have a very strong human centered design discipline, both as part of future state design and the way they organize their initiatives, the way they organize their work. So, it starts from here and the people they're serving that they're fierce about, and then it's culture, but I will also say that the organizational structures and motivation mechanisms also have to support that. Otherwise, you kind of have these things working at odds.
And that tension between the legacy and organizations being designed to scale, organizations being designed to process orders or to serve customers, to pick up the phone, that has been the era businesses have been in. And they've used technology more and more in that space. And you mentioned earlier about AI. And now we're fronting into the AI era. And that is opening up so many angles. And an angle that I'm concerned about is it's the dialogue and the conversations today feel technical
Hmm.
and feel like replacement of humans. You're nodding, which is great. You must be
Oh,
seeing that. Um,
absolutely.
how can we help organizations with maybe frameworks and approaches that say, yes, get the technical right? Yes, look to give the jobs to an AI agent that aren't necessarily fulfilling for humans, but create a more fulfilling role for humans as a result.
Human first thought, not human afterthought. Exactly. I can't agree enough with what you're saying. It's like every conversation on AI, it does jump to, my goodness, what is this going to do to jobs? And, this detailed agent conversation. I see it completely different. And so I think where it ultimately starts is at the strategy table, right? At the leadership table, where we look at the organization we want to create, the organization we want to become, what is possible. So instead of just jumping to the AI sort of tactically and technically, right? What does this strategically allow us to do? What does it mean for our business model options? What human first, what kind of world could we create for the people we serve and this company of humans that work here with us? So I think it starts with that strategy, that business model. And then again, we can flow through to what capabilities we need, to what technology we need, instead of sort of just driving from this AI only angle and this very tactical angle. And the other thing that to me is the gold that is just sitting here for people that think that way is we can create an even better world than today. In maybe like playing this out a little bit more radically, if you think about the orchestration of work, and if I go back to a business architecture construct, a value stream, stages, capabilities are building blocks that enable that. Agents can apply to some of that. Today, back to what you were saying with the legacy structures, we're organized around functional hierarchies. We can organize around capabilities and how, the work actually happens. And to me, that frees humans up to be a lot more creative, to do important work, even to move towards self-managing organizations with truly empowered people working towards shared purpose. So it's all back to what's the art of the possible? What do we want to create? Okay, then let's move forward.
And that legacy world and those structures that we've all designed, the org structures to support a business from an efficiency point of view, very much drove many organizations inward. How can we be more efficient? How can we save more costs? Of course, there was growth. Of course, there was growth, but it was growth at a lower cost, do more for less. I think this opportunity that we're facing into will have to fill the human gap. It will have to look at the human first. Like you said, people are saying digital native, AI native. I'm not hearing human native. How do we drive that?
Yeah, I, I think we can by the questions we ask when we're at those tables, but I also think we can do it by leading, as I said, with the human-centered design discipline, right? So thinking about customer journeys, personas, service design, all those things that I know you of all people know well about, because to me that human side couples with the architecture that makes it real. And even to the extent of, and again, I'm thinking about best practice organizations that I've seen do this well and do transformation well. They have the human experience, the human journey, the personas, like they're they're part of the organization and culture. They have videos about what it's going to look like and feel like, and they have these personas that you see everywhere that like that person. And when you're designing, whether it's architecture, design, development, like you're thinking about that person who has a name and is representative. And so if we can really get the heart and the head involved and help people to see and rally around the experience before they go to, designing how we get there, I think that can be really helpful. And we can really lift that up and lead with that even.
And that leadership is going to amplify the business architecture side of the architecture profession and the business transformation side of businesses, not just the technical one. You're out a lot, Wendy. You're in Berlin, London, Toronto, Thailand. You're all over the world talking at conferences. Are those conferences addressing AI technically, Are they addressing AI as a business opportunity? Are they addressing AI from this human lens? I mean, what would your ratio be from everything you're attending?
To be honest, it's probably 25% of the human stuff, 75% of the technical. The good news is it usually comes around to the 25%. But there's a lot of talk in the 75% that's caught up in the hype. And again, I just literally conversation jump to conversation around agents within a minute. And so it's sorely missing. It's still in, a lot of rooms I'm in, and there are the right people that are driving it, but maybe it's just human nature that we sort of jump to the easy bit, the tangible bit. We need to flip the ratios here, right?
In your experience, going back through your lived experience, um, you went on a journey, I guess, where there weren't frameworks, there weren't approaches, those frameworks and approaches were developed. At what point did you start to see best practice and frameworks approaches being key? And at what point did you start to also complement that with this more human side that maybe not be as obvious when you're in the delivery mode?
Yeah. Of course, there's a saying, right, that there's nothing new under the sun. So, all the things that exist today, they have roots and they have credit back to other thinkers, other disciplines, other frameworks. So, but they were operational. And it goes along with what you were saying before, like how do we operate more effectively? How are we efficient with resources, right? That was the focus of a lot of those things. And they were also siloed. So I would say it was as I was in the throes of leading and architecting transformation that I really started to codify this strategy to execution, in particular with the what needs to be different up front. And it was that where the customer stuff came in and the team of teams that have to work together from strategy to execution. Because again, there's a lot of good disciplines and things, but they weren't necessarily connecting and they weren't necessarily working towards a shared purpose. So that's really the different, the add, the blending of it all.
You know, if you look ahead to the next 5 years, many would say we can't go beyond that. But what would your vision be for that strategy to execution piece? And how different would you love it to be in the coming years?
So now I get to dream because that's like wide open, right? I would love every organization to have the capacity for end to end strategy to execution, that it was a strong muscle. And that means people can work together end to end to get idea into action again and again. It's that team of teams works together. It would be shared, it would be accountability from, it's usually very fragmented today, end to end accountability, also ensuring it delivers value. It would be architecture driven, right? So architecture locking it together and all of those disciplines working together to define the future state. And it would be thinking human and truly strategic in the strategy. So it's more than just thinking human. There's a lot of organizations that I'd love them to build their muscle around strategy formulation and really get more creative, be bolder in their leadership, make more choice. Um, and we're just thinking about humans the whole way. Change management isn't an afterthought. It's the human first. And what I would love is for everyone to have as much conversation on, instead of talking about the tech and agents, what if we spent all that time talking about what kind of a world can we create? What could be different? And I mean, not just within organizations, but I mean within cities and business ecosystems, like truly reimagining. I can't even fathom us amazing people, like all the things we can come up with. What if we spent all that time creating our world instead of into the tech details? And I'm not trying to minimize any of that. It's just All that stuff naturally comes, especially when you have an inspiring vision that's good for people. And how do we turn this into a way to lift people up wherever they are?
I'm brought into that vision 100%. There's so much time and money being spent on technology that is really powerful. And wouldn't it be great if in the years to come, we managed to leapfrog into something better than where we are today? That would just be fantastic.
Perfect way to say it. Leapfrog. We have an opportunity to leapfrog and reimagine. One of the lenses of your book, we have an opportunity to reimagine. And I think one of the most powerful questions is, what if? What if?
You've been awesome hearing your lived experiences, some of the case studies, the insight that you brought to this conversation has been just awesome. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for all that you do and for writing this book and the follow up and for having conversations like these. All the best.
Whatever next, Unplugged. Conversations about making transformation more human, more honest, and more likely to stick. Find out more at whatevernextbook.com.